Hello. I'm so glad to see you,
So good to
Adrian.
see you.
What a joy. Okay, so
Yes.
listeners, we're excited. Thank you for hopping on and listening to the Journey to Heal podcast today. With me today is my friend and our one of our ministry partners, Adrian Simeone. And we're just delighted to have you with us, Adrian.
No, thank you so much. It's so good. I mean, people talk about how this work is hard, but this is like the blessing and the good work that we get to do is to support, each other and raise awareness. So thank you for the invitation and for hosting this podcast to keep raising that necessary awareness.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's my joy to do that. So, those of you that are tuning in today and listening, whether you're in the car and you're driving and you're just tuning in and listening to the audio, or whether you've found us online on our YouTube channel, welcome. And what we're going to be talking about today is about really the pandemic of child sexual abuse and we're going to equip you with some statistics and information. And certainly, most importantly, we're going to tell you a lot about what Adrienne Simeone does and her organization called the Mama Bear Effect. And honestly, I bet you if you're listening today to our podcast, there's a very good chance you have already heard about the Mama Bear Effect. And if you haven't, by the end of this podcast, you will know a lot. And we're going to connect you with her and how you can really begin to dive in and get involved and learn just ways that you can be a part of a prevention movement. So, thank you again, Adrian. I'm excited. So, I'll just tell everybody just a little bit about our connection and kind of the ways we've been able to connect through the years. So, first of all, I think Emily Parker, who's on our board of directors, she has been a fan of the Mama Bear Effect since we launched our nonprofit back in 2018. Is that right? Yeah, 7 years. Our
I
seventh
know.
year,
Time
and
flies.
yeah, and so she's the one that told me all about you years ago and the resources that you have been building and all those things. And so then she is the one who kind of really connected our two organizations, and we started utilizing your materials. In some of our End 1 and 10 events, and then also at our Hope Run when we started doing Hope Run in 2019. And so that's just the relationship's grown. We had you come and speak, I think, at Port City Church at our End 1 and 10 event there a couple years ago. And this year, we're just so grateful to you. You are one of our sponsors for our Hope Run, and that just means the world to us. So thank you. And I know you've sponsored materials and sent to us. We always incorporate Mama Bear materials in every one of our swag bags that go out to our race participants every year, because honestly my hope is that parents, caregivers, even the kids are going to pick it up and go, okay, what is this, and let me read a little more, let me learn. And we just really believe that it's a good touch point, if nothing else, just to discover maybe something that they didn't know before.
Mhm.
So that's exciting. But anyway, so we are thrilled to partner with you. You have just built such a wide girth of resources for parents, caregivers, but also pediatricians. You've done it like both in English and in Spanish. And I've got to tell you, don't let me forget, I was on a call last week with one of the missionaries that serves in Central America and uses some of our materials. And I told him about you, and we're actually going to be, I need to talk to you about this because
Okay.
we're going to be collaborating on getting some of your materials there. And so we'll dive a little bit more into that. But it's just exciting to see how all of this is spreading. But I want you to tell our listeners for yourself, share a bit about yourself, your family, and just tell us a little bit about how the Mama Bear got started and what you do.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started Mama Bear Effect in 2012, and I really started it because my eyes were open to this pandemic, endemic of child sexual abuse. It's continuous. It hasn't, you know, been eliminated for sure. And I think myself as a mother at that time, I had two young children, and I just, when you think about this happening to children and then you look at a child that you know and love, it just affects you in such a different way than a lot of people I think who, might not have children. And so even though, and I think the crazy thing for me is that I was affected by sexual abuse as a child, and I really didn't do this for myself.
Right.
I really did it because I wanted to help protect children, and it kind of blew my mind that this was an issue affecting so many children that there wasn't more awareness. So when we think about what our priorities are as a society, and especially for sexual abuse, I see it as being much more preventable than you
Right.
want to say physical abuse, because most physical abuse is committed by parents, so it's really a parent intervention. But when it comes to sexual abuse, there are a lot of important ways that people can prevent children from being sexually abused. So to think that we have something so serious of children being sexually abused, and we have knowledge of resources and ways to protect kids, but this is not being spread across the globe
Right.
en masse, it just kind of woke me up. So, I mean, for me as a person, I was always looking for God's purpose for my life.
Mhm.
And I knew I definitely grew up feeling like I wanted to be a mother. So when I started Mama Bear, I had two kids. And then in the course of our work, I've had two more. So that's been really amazing and a blessing. And given me a lot of great experience and knowledge and wisdom as I've gone through. I even, took some master's level social work courses, which has
Okay.
helped my work. But yeah, so I think a lot of people feel like I'm not an expert. The experts need to handle this. So it's someone else's job to
Mhm.
raise awareness. And my thought was there's information out there. I have a background in marketing and entrepreneurship. So I didn't necessarily see this as a crime prevention. I saw this as how do we take something that's really uncomfortable for people to talk about and
Mhm.
make it comfortable. So that's kind of the birth of the mama bear effect is that
Right.
when you think about how a mother bear protects her young, she's not asking questions. She's not interested in, oh, am I going to offend you if I charge at you?
Right.
Her number one goal is to protect her kids. And so it's kind of that human part inside of us, and we
Mhm.
want to awaken it a little bit more and say it's not discomfort that matters most, it's the safety of children. And so
Yeah.
I've just really, as you said, made it my mission to educate myself on all the different issues of
Mhm.
child sexual abuse prevention and create our website mostly that is a free, accessible, down to earth website that anyone can learn about this issue because I don't feel there should be any barriers for someone to learn about this.
100%. Yeah. What and I want to hear like I guess and you've shared fragments of it, but I'd love just like a succinct, what is the mission and vision of the Mama Bear Effect and how can people connect with you more? But before I ask that question, you had said something that is just, with what we do at Journey to Heal, we're on the other end of this where we're sitting with women who have been sexually abused in their childhood or adolescence, some of them even early adulthood. And if they would have been, or their families would have been maybe equipped with the information you provide, it very possibly could have been prevented. If nothing else, if they could have been equipped with body safety and some of the things that you share on your website to encourage and empower children, I think it could have helped. So on our end, or my end, as I'm sitting with women, and certainly I know our volunteers as they're doing the same, it's just why the big question we have is why are people not talking about this? Because the statistics are staggering. I just had Dr. Jordan Martine on our or interviewed her for a podcast episode that's going to be aired soon, and she was saying she's a physical therapist for women. She primarily works and serves with women, and she does pelvic floor dysfunction therapy, all those things. I asked her the question of like, what would you say the percentage of women that you serve have experienced sexual trauma? She said 75 to 80%. And I'm just like, why is this not being talked about? So from the prevention end, why? What's your thought on that? I would love to know just why do you think this isn't being talked about?
Yeah, and that's and I think when people talk about how do we end this issue, this is the issue, this is the problem. This is the number one problem we need to solve is that and I've done some research on this because I need to unravel this in order to get into people's minds and change their hearts and give them courage. We have to tackle the kind of the inside fight. Um, I think for one, we have obviously societal taboos about being allowed to talk about these kinds of things. So if you talk about it, then it's a real thing, right?
Right,
And so
right,
many
right,
people want to imagine that this couldn't happen to them or their family or in their community, or it couldn't be perpetrated by someone that they knew. So that's something that happens to people somewhere else.
right,
In many ways, we are trying to protect ourselves because we don't want to acknowledge that we're vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is a huge part of it.
right,
People will put up walls and they'll have create thinking errors so that they can justify why they don't need to learn about this issue. Whenever I talk to someone and they're like, well, I don't know anyone who's been sexually abused, I'm like, oh, but you do. You know so many. You know so many, but like if you're not the type of person
mhm,
that's making that conversation
right,
possible,
right,
then they're not gonna want it. Because I mean, imagine me making a disclosure to someone and then having them make all of those stereotypical comments of,
right.
why didn't you tell? And didn't you know it was wrong? And well, that was kind of
Are you sure
probably
it
your
wasn't
fault.
used?
Yeah,
Right,
you know what I mean? So like the people who are wondering why people don't tell, they
yeah,
need to educate themselves because that's a
right,
big part of the problem. But so yeah, I mean, and we see this happen over and over again. There are scandals that happen in families,
right,
communities,
right,
school systems, the police department, whatever it is, it can happen everywhere. And other departments, other schools don't seem to learn from those mistakes. They still think that they just have good people working for them, and so it just doesn't apply to them. And, it's really frustrating, but we need to overcome that.
yes,
Willful blindness is what I've considered it to be, that you have all the information in front of you to understand that something is a risk factor, but you choose not to accept that or believe that it applies to you.
right,
So
right,
I talk a lot about Margaret Heffernan. She wrote a book about willful blindness and she's done multiple TED Talks about it. And it's really helped me and inspired me to keep that kind of concept in mind when I'm talking to people because we can spout awareness and education all the live long day, but if people aren't
right.
willing to absorb it and really incorporate it into their lives,
Mhm,
it's not going to make much of a difference. But I mean, all that awareness doesn't go to waste. We're always planting seeds, right? We're always
right,
just kind of wearing off those brick walls that people have put around themselves. We're wearing it down to the point where
right,
you can't say that you don't know about this issue. You know, so
yeah,
there's a lot, but absolutely, I think good people who don't want to accept that this issue is an issue for them, I think that's a really big part of the problem.
yeah, yeah. And the mindset of what you said, like for whether it's a school or a church or any organization, they're looking at their staff going, well, that won't happen to us. We've got really good people that work here. They would never, fill in the blank. Yeah.
I had done a talk a couple years ago about sexual abuse of children with disabilities and a lot of the
Yeah.
research that has been done regarding female offenders.
Hmm.
And so, of course, a lot of the people that work in school systems and work with children with disabilities are female. And so I was talking about, how women perpetrate sexual abuse. And I had people making comments like, she's focusing on women and women are, it's like, but women are not this perfect sex. You know what I mean? There are female perpetrators out there. So it's kind of
Right.
funny that they got defensive. It's like, I'm a woman and I'm talking about how women can perpetrate sexual abuse. So it's
Right.
like, we all need to hold each other accountable.
Right,
know?
right,
It,
right. Yeah.
that shouldn't be a problem for us.
No, and it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't prevent us. But to see, this is exactly comes back to what you said earlier. These are hard conversations. These are they make people feel vulnerable, and I think that's a great way to phrase it. They make people feel icky. I remember at Hope Run last year, I was sharing with a gentleman of a situation that was unfolding. During the event, and it was just a connection that was being made that really needed to be made, that was helpful to this particular family that had been through just the horrors of sexual abuse, and it was public information. The husband of the family had abused his children. It was on the news. It was a whole deal, and they came to the Hope Run. We were able to connect them with some help and some resources. And so I was telling this gentleman a little bit about that's why we do this race. That's why we do what we do, is to make people aware, raise awareness on all kinds of levels. And when I proceeded to tell him, it was that their father had abused them, and they're going through the court system and just the difficulties. To me, this is stuff I hear all the time. Like, I'm used to this. I'm not. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, it's
It's
not
not sensitive to you. You're not,
not sensitive
yeah,
to me. Yeah, I'm totally desensitized to it. And of course, that is why we were there at the race. And his response to me was just kind of it made me realize not everyone is desensitized to
yeah, I
this, and
know.
I need to be
We have
careful.
to keep that in mind. I know. It's
I have
hard
to
for
keep
us
that
because
in
we've
mind.
been in it for so
But
long.
it is so long, and his response to me was, "Stop! Don't tell me anymore. It's very upsetting." And I was
Oh.
like, "But that's why we're here."
I know. Whenever I hear a story and it's like breaks my heart,
Mhm.
in some way I feel like if I can carry that pain for a little bit, that in
Yes,
some way it lessens the pain of the person who went through that. You know what I mean? They shouldn't have to carry all that pain. So yeah, there are times where this stuff is painful, but I'm like, with God, we can carry these burdens. So we
we
need to
can.
we need to carry a little bit for people, even if in
Yes,
some way you know what I mean? We're all connected. And
yes,
so that's how I try to look at it. Like I can carry this for this person for a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
Not everybody's
100%.
ready.
Not everybody's ready. No, and I think, but I appreciate the answer to my question, because I think it is vulnerability. People don't like that. They don't want to feel weak. They don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't want to, the idea of being um, exposed with information, and then how do I respond in real time to that information, is a lot of it. It's just a big mess. I had another person tell me in the church years ago that kind of something similar. The comment was, "Crystal, I know this is really important to you," and so forth. I was pressing on in particular on, please tell me, what are your parameters for your children's program? Like, what are you doing? What are some of the safety measures that are, and how are you training your staff? And the response was, well, we do XYZ. And it was just kind of like the basic,
Yeah.
whatever. And he said, but we find that people don't really like to talk about this. And so, we try not to, we don't want to scare off volunteers. And I was just like,
You
not
want to scare off the wrong ones.
a good answer.
I know. It's so hard. It's so hard. But it's so important to hold the organizations accountable because we are entrusting them with our
Yes.
children. So I want the person who has the courage to say, nope, I prioritize the safety of your child, and these are the expectations I have. I was really excited when I brought my kids into a new summer camp that's run by a
Mhm,
Christian school,
mhm,
and I asked them like, oh, and they went into detail about what
mhm.
they do to keep their staff trained and everything. And not that
Right.
there isn't always room for improvement,
Of
but
course.
that was the best conversation I'd ever had because they were right on top of it. They were like, nope, 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 no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know what I mean? And it was really refreshing. So you know what I
Um,
mean? We're making progress. It's just
yes.
everything takes time.
It takes time, and I think it's what it comes back to. We have to be willing to have these conversations. We have to be willing to be vulnerable. We have to understand as a society, we really are all interconnected, and we really do need to, like you said, hold other people's stories or their hurt long enough that we can better understand and figure out how can we prevent this. So share with our listeners just kind of the mission and the vision of the mama bear effect, and just kind of maybe how while we've got our listeners listening, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So I mean, my vision for the Mama Bear effect is to imagine what the world would look like if every good person was educated and aware of this issue and did everything that they could do to keep kids safe and empowered. And it's just like it gives me a sense of hope because it's not impossible. This is not an impossible thing. It is absolutely possible. I just like imagine this tsunami of just awareness and change and courage coming through society and like, oh my gosh, like I can see it. Like it would be so amazing and there would be so many other benefits to families and children and communities if we did that. So that's my vision is like this future where people aren't afraid of this anymore. And it's like,
Right.
they talk about, remember those days when people thought it was ridiculous to talk about this stuff? It's just like, I definitely can see it as a possibility. Might not be, it's probably realistically, I consider myself an optimistic realistic. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, and that's okay. But I still believe that it's absolutely possible if we work towards it. So, I mean, our mission is to help anybody who wants to share awareness and education about this issue. Of course, through our website, but then we've created a lot of printed and even free downloadable resources because I don't want any barriers to someone who wants to learn and share. So one of our biggest items that people order through our website is the free downloads, which historically I used to just have it listed as a PDF that people could just download. Now I have it in the shop and it's still free, but now I can count how many times people download it to be like, wow, it's a lot. A lot of organizations and of course what you're saying, like working with South America, it's really awesome when we get to work with an organization in another country that is
Right.
like, hey, if we translate this for you, will you put it together for us? I'm like, let's do it. You know what I mean? And then we do that, and now they have tools to share
Right.
in their little villages or in small communities because a
Right.
lot of this is very grassroots in other countries.
Right.
A mom that I'm talking with locally, her church, her priest is in Uganda right now, I think, and we're
Mm.
coordinating. I'm like, I don't think I've even realized like how amazing this is. We're coordinating to have me do a body safety talk to a bunch of girls in this village in Uganda.
Yeah,
I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this is he
that's
wanted to do
awesome.
it this Friday and I was like, wait, we need a little bit more time to prepare. But it's like we can even send him the PDFs that they can download and the kids can,
Love
use.
it.
So it's like so amazing.
I love
So
that.
yeah, so that's our goal. When you guys, had reached out before, I want to donate materials because I know that people are not really funding this. Um, so we do a lot of work with child advocacy centers, of course. They oftentimes have that prevention team that goes out to do presentations or maybe sometimes even in-school talks with kids. So they love to have resources to give out to their community. And I think me, myself, being in marketing, the one thing that I did a little differently when I first started was that when I looked at organizations, like especially CACs, if they had like a resource, it would be this like Microsoft Word document that had been like photocopied 100 times. It wasn't impressive. So if you're someone like, here, learn about this issue, and it's like this document that you can barely read and it's not well presented, you
Right.
think this isn't really important because they haven't even invested the time to make an appealing resource. So,
Right.
I mean, thankfully, I have some background with graphic design, and we have a graphic designer on our board, Laura Messing of Design Invasion, who has been with us since before day one. She created our beautiful Mama Bear Effect logo, and she is a blessing. God has put so many amazing people on my path. It's just, I cannot even deny that that has happened because it's just been incredible, like one after another.
I love it.
So that has really helped because people, that's what people say is, we love your materials because they're down to earth, they're engaging, and they look nice, you know? And so that's really what we want to do. It's like sometimes if you want to have people believe in something, you have to, show people that you're something worth believing in. So some of like we'll give out, body safety rules, mood rulers to give out to schools, and the kids are like obsessed with them. But it's just like all these little touch points to say to kids, your safety and your wellness and your right to be respected is something that people value. And so it's been really a blessing. This is just, I wish there were more hours in the day to do this work because I would keep doing it. When I first started, I had a lot of energy. I could stay up till 11 o'clock at night. My
Yeah.
son used to sleep through the night, so that was great. I'm a little older now. I'm definitely getting a little more tired. So it's a little harder to crunch all the work in a day, but
Yeah.
I've never gotten tired of this.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, it's so needed and it's so important. So I love that. And just for folks that are listening and tuning in and so forth right now, just in case they have to hop off and go to work or, I don't know, go get that pot of tea off of the stove. I'm not sure, but we got this little tiny break. Where would you point them to so they can find out about your resources?
Yeah, I think definitely go to the Mama Bear effect.org, MAMA, and then effect, EFFECT.org.
.org, yeah. So, and it's the Mama Bear.
The, the Mama Bear effect, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can also go on Instagram and Facebook if you're an Instagram or Facebook person. Are you on TikTok
I
too?
am on TikTok.
Are you on
I've
TikTok?
been on for like 3 years, 4 years
Oh
maybe.
gosh,
Are you
okay.
on
Well,
TikTok?
people keep saying you need to go on TikTok. You need to put Journey to Heal on TikTok, and I'm like,
Well,
y'all, I am
you would be
not.
good at it because you're comfortable talking on video. You know what I mean? But the thing, and just like any social media platform, TikTok, in the first year, I got up to like 23,000 something followers or whatever. But now it's like if I'd get 50 likes within 20 minutes and then it just dies. So I mean,
Uh,
it's annoying. There's an algorithm that they have,
okay.
and I think they want you to pay to promote. So that's really the mentality. They get you all built up, and then they want you to pay to promote so your people can see the stuff. Because I mean, it's good. It's good.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say not to do it, but at some
yeah,
point you kind of are going, this is a lot of work? So you
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
got to pick where you want to put your energy.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what you were saying, just I was like up till ridiculous hours of the night, and when this first started, and we're in our seventh year now. And of course, I have to add on, it's not just the 7 years of nonprofit. It was back in 2012, 2011. I started writing the book
Yeah.
that started the whole thing. So it's been a while. It's been a while. And so for me, yeah, I'm starting to get kind of tired. So the idea of adding another layer of social media is just like, I'm already doing.
The only thing I like about TikTok is you can record a video and reverse it. So if you want to show your book, it will actually show it in the right thing because Instagram won't let you do that, and it's very annoying. They
Okay.
need to get on board with that. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll record on TikTok just to repost on Instagram because at least people can see what I'm holding up.
What you're holding up. I like
Yeah,
that. I like that. Yeah.
yeah.
So one of the questions that I had is, what would you say, because you've been doing this now for a long time, you have been raising awareness, you've been educating caregivers and parents and organizations and CEOs and pastors and on and on and on, right? What would you say is your greatest challenge in fostering awareness and prevention? What would be like, just, I know earlier you were talking about that,
Yeah.
the willful blindness.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely feel like that's a big part of it. A couple of years ago, actually, it's probably been like 3 years now, we did our first research project to
Oh,
understand like where parents and caregivers were learning about this and where they would like to learn and, what kind of information and knowledge did they have? Did they still believe the misconceptions? Do they know who the perpetrators are? So that gave us a lot of great information, but the root motivation for doing that was because for years I had felt Of course, a lot of education comes through the school system, but a lot of times that's too late, and it's only a once a year lesson these kids get. And so sometimes information goes home to parents, but a lot of times it doesn't. So how do we get to parents? And that's really been the number one question of how do we access parents and get this information to them? So I had been saying to people, like, we need to be working with doctors. We need to be working with pediatricians and family care practitioners because parents bring their kids in at least once a year for a
Right.
checkup. And a
Right.
doctor engages with a child's body on a very personal level.
Right.
So why is this not an amazing resource? And so with my four kids, none of my doctors talked to me or my kids about this. And I was kind of like, why is that? And so again, we have this blindness or this lack of responsibility. I think that's another issue too, is that everybody doesn't realize that we all share the responsibility to protect innocent life.
Right.
And
Right.
so even if you don't have children of your own, I'm sure you know someone who does, or you
Right.
interact with children, whether they're your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren. We all model behaviors and have opportunities to empower children and teach them like what's appropriate and model safe behaviors. So I had heard like, oh, doctors don't really want anything to do with it. A lot of them don't because they're afraid. I know it's kind of, and I don't speak for all doctors, so I want to make that
Right.
clear because I don't,
Right.
we've actually worked with some great doctors, but there is a segment of doctors who are afraid to talk about this issue because then they feel like if someone makes a disclosure, now they have to do something with that. And
Right.
they also have that hesitancy of, well, what happens and then I have to report and then what if I'm wrong, right? Because that's what a lot of people, their fear is, I suspect something's going on, but I'm afraid if I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, then they're going to be mad at me or, whatever it is. So my mission has been to partner with doctors and be like, I don't want you to be the expert. I want you to be the conduit. Put it out in the waiting room. Put a poster in your exam room. You don't have to be the expert talking to
Right.
families, but you can
Right.
point them in the direction of where they
Right.
can learn. And you can partner with your CACs so that if a family does have a concern, because most doctors are not equipped to even examine a child for sexual abuse. So sometimes parents like think their first call should be their doctor. It shouldn't be. They really have no clue. They don't.
Really?
They have
I didn't
no,
know that.
yeah, oh yeah, they would, most pediatricians cannot find a hymen on an adolescent child. So they really don't know what they're looking for. You need a pediatric sane nurse, a sexual
Okay.
assault nurse examiner, or a
Okay.
sexual abuse doctor who
A
are
sexual
specifically
assault.
trained. So a couple years ago, I found Dr. Martin Finkel,
Okay.
who is like one of the founding child abuse pediatricians in America.
Okay. Dr. Martin Finkel.
Martin
I'm
Finkel.
gonna
So
write
like
this
in the 1960s, that's when the whole battered child syndrome stuff started raising awareness.
down.
And they started really doing more research on the issues of child abuse. And then they started opening the door about sexual abuse being a problem. Um, and so Dr. Martin Finkel, we've been working with him for the past few years. I reached out to him and he responded because I actually found that he had written an article about how pediatricians could talk to families about sexual abuse. And I was just like, needle in the haystack, I found him because I couldn't find any doctor who was talking about this. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense. How can they not? So when I mean, he's now retired from work, which has given him a little more time to work with us, but he was like, I I got into this work and he's like, I've been dealing with children who were sexually abused and doing these exams and helping these kids. But he goes, I've been saying for years, doctors need to talk to families about this because most perpetrators, as we know, is someone that the child knows. A lot of
Right.
times it's another child.
Right.
So if so much of it's happening within a family,
Right.
why would you not be educating families about this issue? You know?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So that's really, I think one of the biggest barriers is how do we get prevention education out into the world so that it's a people are aware. A lot of people still are not very much aware to the extent in which child sexual abuse occurs within our country.
Exactly. And you know what? It just, as you're talking about this, I'm just wondering what would it look like if the universities, where medical schools are, where this was incorporated in the curriculum, where this was
Exactly.
incorporated in the degree track, that you have to take a class, if you're going to be a doctor, a nurse, a pediatric nurse, a pediatrician, don't matter if you're going to be working with kids, that you
Yeah,
have to take a class on sexual abuse
yeah.
and where it's coming from and prevention and how to talk to parents. Like even have like that just should be there.
It should be standard. It should be a standard of care. And
Yes,
so, it's becoming more aware. A lot more of the younger generation of doctors are aware of ACEs and trauma and things like that.
right,
So, like one of the things I'll say to pediatrician offices when we go to talk to them or at conferences is that you are most likely having children come in with symptoms of trauma and you don't know it. So
right,
they might have headaches. They might have stomach issues, digestive issues. They might have eczema. Their skin might be breaking out in rashes. These are all responses to stress. So the
right.
question is, are you going to just give them a pill or a cream? Or are you going to ask questions and open up opportunities to identify a potential root cause? And I've mentioned this before, but I think it was about 8 years ago, the Atlantic magazine put out an article about children being diagnosed with ADHD and being put on ADHD medication when these children had PTSD.
Right,
So
right,
again, we're medicalizing children who don't need to be and are
right,
missing the opportunity to help them heal from their trauma. So
right.
it's like the involvement of the medical community is integral to prevention and stopping abuse.
Yes. Well, and wouldn't you say too, the involvement of teachers? So you think about where the vast majority of children spend and adolescents spend their day every day. I mean, it's 7 to 8 hours in an institution where they're surrounded by educators. It just seems to me that there should be a deep dive, not just a extracurricular course or, maybe a little bit of a chat about, but a deep dive into what you just shared, which is what are some of the symptoms of PTSD? How do you, when you have a student that's acting out, how do you address that? Do you just go straight to, the high level possibilities of ADD or ADHD, or whatever, or do you dive a little deeper? Can you dive a little deeper? Where should that happen? Should that be the guidance counselor, the school nurse? What are the questions to ask? And then what do you do if you do discover, that this child has been abused at home or is being abused at home and it's gone unreported? I mean, just so many things. Like I think about, for me personally, um,
Yeah, and like I mean, here in Massachusetts, we have mandated reporter training, which I've taken from my own knowledge.
right,
It barely scratches the surface of a lot of the
right,
symptoms. It's very rudimentary. Most people would miss the symptoms of sexual
right,
abuse or any kind of trauma because
right,
it's not addressing the breadth of what it entails, So
right,
kids who can't focus in class or, you know, kids who have impulse control issues, things like that. I mean, or just a change in a child's behavior.
right,
And a lot of schools now do have school psychologists,
right,
which is good because, yeah, it's tough. You want a teacher to not have to bear that burden of making a diagnosis themselves. You want to, but then again, that's why CACs exist too. You know what I mean? CACs exist to help really do that forensic interviewing, and
right,
I don't think I would rather do more of them and
right,
and find out there are not as many kids who were sexually
right,
abused than
right,
only interview the ones who absolutely were. We need to be
exactly.
spreading a wider net to help give the kids help that they need.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So, speaking of, just that awareness piece and kind of a focus on, um, a, I guess addressing these issues as we see them, or casting that wider net, I guess, of understanding. What, April is deemed, a national uh, kind of awareness month for both sexual assault and child abuse prevention, right? I mean, really, this is something that should be focused on throughout the year
Sure.
because
Obviously.
it's obviously right, but we've highlighted it as a nation. And so what would you say, just for our listeners, because I know some that are tuning in, they're survivors and they follow us at Journey to Heal, and so they're aware, personally of, the impact of sexual abuse, but some listeners, they may not be understand the scope of this problem. So could you share a little bit, like just encapsulate what are the current stats in America on sexual abuse, and who are the primary perpetrators of this kind of abuse?
Yeah. So when they did the first ACE study in the 1990s, um, and the one thing I like to say about that study is that when they asked people about experience of sexual abuse, they stipulated that in order for you to say, yes, you experienced sexual abuse, the perpetrator had to be at least 5 years older than you. So that actually reduced some of those cases of people who maybe it was 3 years or 2 years, um, that should have been able to say yes on that survey. But so that survey had said that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men had been survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And that was a survey of like 18,000 adults
Wow.
within Kaiser Permanente, doing wellness exams with people and then assessing their physical and mental health as adults. So that was a
Okay.
really great landmark study that really put it out there undeniably that child sexual abuse is a pandemic. And so I feel like it's gotten a little confusing with statistics in the past 20 years because in the 1990s, early 1990s, we didn't have internet.
Right.
So now we have this whole internet crimes and children being exploited online, abused online. So now sometimes when we're reading research studies, there's a couple of things we have to keep in mind. One, sometimes statistics are based on what's reported to the authorities. That doesn't give us a good depiction of the reality of this issue. That's very few cases are reported. So that's not good data, to use. So when we're looking at some of these other research cases, sometimes they exclude online sexual abuse. And I think
Right.
that's wrong because that's
100%.
absolutely traumatic and abusive of children to do those types of things.
Right.
So it's really challenging to understand. So, when we've been looking at some of the research, we're still seeing close to, possibly, like you used 1 in 10, it might be 1 in 10. A lot of times it's still a higher rate for females
Okay.
than males. I've seen some studies where it says 1 in 13 males, 1 in 25 males. But again, we also know that it's really hard for people to disclose.
Right.
And so now with the ACE study, a lot of different states are doing ACE studies and they change them and they're using their own questions and things like that. But like it's like regardless, even if it was 1 in 20, which it's not, you know what I mean? It's more than 1 in 10.
Right.
Um, it's a lot. It's a
It's a
lot
lot.
of
Yeah.
kids. It's
Well,
too
because
many.
it's too many. Well, and because it's like, what is it? I think it's Darkness to Light, or it might even be the Rape and Incest National Network. I think I don't know what studies they're pulling from. I can't remember, but I
Mhm.
know they're saying things like, what is it, 90%, or sorry, I'm sorry, 40% don't report, or only 40% report. And
Yeah.
so something like that. So it's less than half. So even if, you know, my
And
question
that
now,
might be and that might be adult. That might be adult sexual abuse, I'm wondering. Because Rain has a strong focus on it's challenging. It's
challenging.
challenging.
Well, it's darkness to light is where I think I've got the 40%
Okay.
piece. And they work for, concerning children. But either way, I've always wondered, like, well, how do you know it's 40%? How do you
Yeah.
know 40% are the ones who report? Because you'd have to know the whole amount of people that have been abused
Exactly.
to even know
Yeah.
that. Like, that doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense how you're coming up with these numbers. So what I always tell people, because if we get asked or whatever, what are the statistics, I just tell them, if you just look in a space of, you know, wherever you're at, a playground, just imagine one out of for every 10 kids,
Yeah.
and probably more so.
Yeah,
one of them has been or will be, sexually abused. Isn't it like 1 in 3 women have, and of course, again, these statistics are all over the place, and I've seen statistics of 1 in 6 men. I think
yeah,
we've even repeated that before.
yeah,
And then there's statistics say 1 in 4 women have, and one in,
yeah,
what, like you say, 13, and then sometimes it's 25, and you're like, okay, well, what is it? But at
yeah,
the end of the day, I think we know that it's a large percentage of our population, our adult population, has experienced sexual abuse. And if nothing changes, a large percentage of our population of children, which would be minors, people under, whatever the respective ages are across the country, uh, are going to experience or have experienced sexual abuse. You know, it it's like you said, even if it is 1 out of 20, that is a lot of people. And that's a lot of children. We don't want it to even be one, because the devastating effect, the ripple effect,
yeah,
which is what we see on our end as a ministry, the ripple effect is just, it's devastating, what it does to not just the victim, but what it does to their children, their family, their extended family, their entire life. And if it doesn't get addressed early, the damage can be very long term. And yeah, so it's just, whether it's 1 in 10 or 1 in 20,
yeah.
we have to become aware as a society. So a question, I think, just kind of along those lines is, as we, and I think probably a good idea here is to maybe uh, take a pause. And I want to ask this one question. I think maybe we take a pause, and we'll hop back on and do a second part to this. I think our listeners might appreciate that, because this is so good. And if you've got the time, I think it'd just be
Oh,
wonderful to
absolutely.
dive into these other questions. Okay. But before we end, and so, those of you that are listening, I want to leave you with this, because I think this is so important. We hear it all the time at Journey to Heal. Um, the the concept that somehow, I mean, I can't tell you how many times when people ask, what do we do as ministry, they're like, oh, so do you have, like, a shelter, or like a rescue for human trafficking victims? And I'm like, we what? They're just
But that's
like,
what that's where a lot of people think, you
that's
know?
what they think. They think this is happening to some girl that was stolen somewhere,
Yeah,
or it's only in the Hispanic community, or it's only in the Black community, or
yeah,
it's
or the
only
poor
in the
community, or yeah,
poor communities, whatever. This is happening everywhere, and the perpetrators will shock you who they are. And that's who I'd love if you just take a minute and kind of share, just educate our listeners on who are the primary perpetrators of child sexual abuse.
yeah. So I mean, we know that the vast majority of them, I mean, some places they'll say 90%, but that was actually, I think, for reported abuse to the authorities. When we
Right.
look at the whole scale of everything that hasn't been reported, it's been closer to 93 to 95%.
Right.
Are people known and trusted by that child in their life? So, rough estimates of, potentially 40 to 50% of those people are family members,
Mm.
someone that's related to that child, which, then within that, okay, we have another, now, this is something that has changed. When I first started, it was 30 to 40% of perpetrators were also juveniles.
Okay.
Now, in the last few years, those statistics have moved to 50 to 77% being juveniles.
Wow.
So, and a lot of that has to do with sexualization of children. They're
Right.
being, and it's not just pornography, it's everywhere. Everything that's being done, and it's being normalized with children. And so people, I hear this all the time, and it's really frustrating for me. They're like, well, kids are gonna do this anyway. And I'm like, they weren't before.
Yeah.
They weren't
Yeah.
doing this before like
Yeah.
this. So that's not true.
Right.
And it's not fair because a lot of people think the solution is, well, we'll just have to give them sex ed. We got to give them condoms and get girls on birth control because they're going to do this anyway. And I'm like, no, they're not. And it's
No.
not fair to burden a child who's halfway through their brain development to
Right.
then give them the responsibility of being sexually active. We
Right.
know that when the younger someone becomes sexually active, the less likely they are to be productive later in life. They're more likely to have issues with healthy relationships, holding on to a steady job, and having a successful personal and professional life. So
Right.
so that's a really important statistic, because, again, that speaks to the need to educate parents. Because if children are behaving in sexual ways, the number one person who's going to be able to help prevent that and promote healthy behaviors with kids are parents. There's
Right.
just no way around it. There's no class in school that's going to be able to ever do what a parent can do. And me personally, I would always be concerned about what schools are teaching kids because it's a lot of the sexualization stuff, unfortunately.
Right.
But so we also know that, a decent percentage of these people are also someone trusted by that child. So it's a teacher, it's a coach, it's a youth minister, it's a babysitter, it's, someone within their community, it's a family friend. And that's why it's so important that youth serving organizations and churches and all these people who interact with kids. I mean, I myself, I volunteer with children. And so
Mhm.
I'm always feeling that too, like, oh my gosh, I never want to put myself in a situation with a child where I could be, you know, um, suspected of having done something and there wasn't supervision. Or I don't
Right.
want to say something to a child that was inappropriate, because sometimes stuff just comes out of our mouths and you're like, oh, wait, I should not have said that. Or like the way that came out was really bad. So
Right.
like for me personally, one of the biggest issues that we've had is that when we're talking about the online sexual abuse, like online perpetrators,
Right.
historically I used to say that's the stranger danger. The stranger danger is in your child's back pocket. Now statistics are showing that 60%, roughly estimated, of the people who are perpetrating sexual abuse of children online are someone known to the child in their real life. So we have people, whether it's family members or teachers or coaches or whoever it is, they get that child's cell phone number or they friend them on social media or they play a game with them and they're grooming them and they're abusing them online, which then enables them to sexually abuse them in person. So parents have to be so strict with phones and social media and access to the internet. I mean, I used to be like, oh yeah, figure out the parental settings. No, no, it's not enough. There's no parental setting that
Right.
can keep your child safe. Um,
Right.
Definitely, parents have to delay the phones as long as
Right.
possible. Don't even
Yes.
get a smartphone. Um,
Yes.
it's just, you don't ask me to control something that I can't control. You know what I mean? They're like, how do I teach my kid to be safe online? I'm like, you can't. Do you
No. No.
don't like you like it's like saying to me, Adrian, please teach my 12-year-old how to drive a car. I'm going to tell you
Right.
they're not ready. These
Right.
kids are not ready for these phones.
No.
And I
No.
mean, it's exhausting for me. It's a struggle.
Right.
My kids are like, you're on
No.
your
I
phone
get
too
it.
much. And I'm like, I know. It's exhausting. And I'm so glad that we didn't have to grow up with all of this stuff where
Right.
everybody's living their perfect life on social media and all those other negative things that go along with it. But now we
Right.
have so many other real dangers that are coming along with it. We cannot keep up. We cannot
Right.
keep up. I'm not going to teach my kid how to swim in a fast river. And that's what this is like. It's like throwing kids in a river and being like, I don't know what happened. Everybody else was throwing their kid in the river, so I thought it was going to be okay. You know, these kids
Well,
are struggling with this
they're
stuff.
struggling because it is overwhelming. It is an
Yeah,
overwhelming, it's happening so fast. And this leads me to something that in our second part, I would love, it's one of the questions that I have for you about online safety in
yeah.
particular, and just kind of helping our listeners to understand maybe a little bit more about how this is probably online sexual abuse, one of the fastest growing forms
It's
of sexual
it's
abuse
made
in
our job so
children.
much harder.
Oh my goodness,
So much harder.
it's yeah, it's just staggering. So, but I want to end on this with this part on a positive note. If you're listening today, listen, we're covering a lot of ground because it's important, and we're touching on statistics. We're touching on child abuse prevention. We're talking about the Mama Bear Effect. You can go to the mamabeareffect.org. You can learn more about Adrienne Simeone and the work that she's doing. Her and her team are doing. We're going to come back on for a second part to this to dive further into online safety and to talk about some of the specific materials that Adrienne has developed. And but if you're listening and you're like, already overwhelmed with, wait a minute, what? I didn't know about these statistics. And wait a minute, I just got my kid a smartphone. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? We just want to give you hope, okay? And on a note of, listen, there are resources out there for you as a parent and as a caregiver to learn about this issue of sexual abuse, really the pandemic of it. It's just an unbelievable widespread issue, but you can educate yourself as a parent, and therefore when you get educated and you understand how to protect your children, you can begin to incorporate that baby steps into your own family life and how you navigate things. You don't have to have it all figured out right away, but you should be open to learning, and there's resources out there for you, and that's why we have Adrienne on our podcast today. So don't feel overwhelmed. Just don't close your ears and your eyes to this. We need you to be wide awake, because that's what we want to do, is help protect kids, particularly shining a light on this during the month of April, because it's Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month. So thank you, Adrienne, for being
Yeah,
on
thank you.
this first part. And we're going to hop on for a second part. And thank you all for listening. And we'll talk to you soon.